All right. Reagan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you all.
Wonderful. All right. Take it away, Evan.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first Interfaith Dialogue of the new semester. Thank all of you guys for being here. Thank our lovely panelists for being here. And we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you guys for being here. Just please introduce yourselves in the way that you like to be referred to, and let us know kind of briefly about your faith tradition, your worldview, or kind of your relationship to spirituality more generally.
All right. Well, my name is Royce. Royce Larry, but you can just call me Royce. That's totally fine. And I am a Christian, so my faith is as a Christian. I believe that Jesus is the Christ, and that is centric to my worldview and how all of that works.
My name is Christian. However, I do not identify as a Christian. My background, spiritually, really, I got heavily introduced to Buddhism. I was very interested in that. So I came from an Eastern worldview philosophy, got heavily into Taoism, and then once I came to Bellarmine, I kind of had the reverse, where Thomas Merton had the perspective of the Catholic view, and then bridging to the Eastern, I had the reverse, where I started understanding it through my understanding of the Eastern tradition.
That's really interesting. So now that we know a little bit about your guys' faith tradition and worldview, how do you guys use creative pursuits to help you practice your spirituality, and what mediums do you generally pursue these things?
Yeah, so the primary mediums that I work through, the biggest one is music. I do a ton of music, and I have for a long, long time. But I also dabble a little bit in visual arts. My favorite is oil pastel, for any of you that like to get your hands dirty. It's fun. And then these days, I'm actually full-time doing worship ministry as of just a few months ago. And so in doing that, I've actually picked up some graphic art as well to kind of fill a need that we have, but also it's been really interesting for me creatively to kind of pick up that new medium and put the computers to work. So.
And yeah, the same thing here with music. Music has always been a huge part of my life. Growing up doing piano, classically trained, and then since I've gotten, well, when I went here and then graduated, I've explored and branched out more in different genres. And for me, I experience a lot of, there's a spiritual piece that I have when I'm creating or sitting down at the piano. And I think I've had this conversation with Dave Clark a lot about there's something profound where you're able to kind of lose yourself and find yourself at the same time.
So do your tradition or your community emphasize any specific creative mediums, and are there any unique artistic practices that you value and would like to share with us?
Yeah, so obviously I mentioned music is a big deal for us, and as a worship minister, that's a huge part of our kind of community and faith tradition, right? It's usually anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes of our service is actually playing music together with a congregation of people. Giving glory to God, celebrating together, being together. The exciting things for me, specifically, the ability to lead a team and work with a team of people rather than just my own specific art. That's been really cool. So, creatively, there's something really, really powerful when you're kind of on it yourself, but then when you are able to see and compose with a series of people that are really gifted at what they do, and then you create something new and fantastic together. It's really powerful. It's really cool. Has been my experience. And then, obviously leading worship, one of the cool things is we're using that composition to create an atmosphere where people that maybe they don't have your gift, but they're able to leverage your gift to have, a creative and spiritual interaction that they wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to have. So that's been very kind of unique to my experience.
Just really quickly, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Do you, your tradition, or your community emphasize any specific creative mediums, and are there any unique artistic practices that you value and would like to share?
Okay. For me personally, creating, so when I came here and I was studying, technically my degree was music and composition. So I always saw myself as a composer, but I felt I was heavily pushed towards performance, and I felt it wasn't as fulfilling for my inner self, like my spirit kind of, because there wasn't as much freedom to express myself. So I experienced a lot of freedom in exploring, sitting down at the piano, just giving myself the freedom that there's really no such thing as a wrong note. There's no such thing as something that sounds bad. It's just an acquired taste. So like whenever I teach, I emphasize that too. I give the student a lot of freedom because having that classical background, it's really rigid. You have a lot of rules. And spiritually, I feel like you have to free yourself mentally of a lot of things so that you're not so self-conscious about what you're doing. And I apply that in music, where music should be freedom. You're free to express yourself how you need to. And I find that to be more fulfilling. And also, when I show other people that, they have misconceptions about music, that there's so much limitless possibility, then I see those aha, oh my gosh, like they're hooked. And for me, that's how I experience spirituality, through what I do musically and what I'm trying to help others as well.
So how does the creative spirit help you find or make meaning in life? And what value does creativity add to your faith or spiritual practice?
So for me, in some ways, the question is backwards, at least the first part of it. And what I mean by that is, like, I think our creativity and how we interact creatively can help us find meaning and understand the things around us. But as a Christian, I identify as a child of God first and foremost. And so that is centric to how my creativity works. And all of my creativity and how those things come alive, especially these days, is an outpouring, an overflow, if you will, of that awesome, relationship that I'm able to have with God the Father. So it's pretty cool, 1 John 3:1, how great is the love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called children of God. And so just latching onto that really sets me free in my art. And I agree with you. I think it's fun to sit with an instrument and just pick notes. And it's really cool as I think about kind of for me specifically and how it impacts my spiritual practices. Every time I pick up an instrument or sit in an instrument or I'm exploring sounds or lyric, it's all kind of released when I take a minute and I kind of think like, hey, God, what do you have for this moment? What does this look like? And get to have that interaction and then release my hands and my mind to see what comes out. It's pretty fantastic. The other thing I would say, like just from a faith perspective, as a Christian, I'm on mission. And Jesus was pretty clear with us about the mission and what that should be. In Matthew 28, verse 19 and 20, he talks about, hey, go make disciples, go teach them. Get out there, do something with what I've given you, with these gifts that you have. And so for me, I kind of leverage my platform as a worship leader to be on that mission and use it as an opportunity to teach others how they can have a new and profound interaction with God through music, by giving him the glory, surrendering themselves, releasing whatever it is they're worried about, thinking about, let that stuff go, lay it down, and allow an opportunity for something inside you to come out that you didn't know was there.
So I was gonna tag off of what, is it
Royce.
Royce?
Yeah.
Royce just left off on, through connecting with God. I kind of want to mention really quick that the way I like to find, I guess, quote unquote, meaning or make sense of my spirituality connecting to music is I don't really like to personify or think of God as this, like, I think of it more like the source, I guess, because I feel like all of us as humans, no matter what you identify as, we can all kind of agree that we have this sense we don't really know, but all of this and all of us came from somewhere. And so for me, I think of, especially in Taoism, they talk about the Tao. In the Tao Te Ching, the very first thing they say is, or in the first chapter, Lao Tzu said that the Tao which can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The Tao which can be described is not the eternal Tao. The Tao which can be written. So it's kind of this concept where roughly it's translated as the way or the source or the that one thing that everything came from. Or in, I think, Hinduism or the yogis say, like Shiva. Shiva literally means like that which is not, from which everything comes into existence. So I don't like to think of like a creator or God or even saying necessarily creation because that implies a creator. So I kind of think of it as the source and honoring that when I'm doing music, you get in this meditative trance almost. Like you lose the sense of time and you're in that almost like that Zen state, that Zen Buddhist monks, it's kind of like you can't even talk about it. They have that same concept that as soon as you try to articulate it, you don't come close to what it actually is. So I kind of think of God as that same thing. It's that you can't really articulate it, you can't really describe it. It's different for everyone, but it's kind of like this unspeakable thing that we all experience, that we kind of have this rough idea that it's similar. We get it, but it's really hard to put into words. And so for me, music is that way to kind of express that words just can't do. It doesn't define it in this box. It's this indescribable thing. And music is very similar in that way because it's hard to describe sounds and stuff itself.
So our questions so far have mostly been about connecting kind of with the divine, with your spirituality, but this next question takes a look a little bit more on the earthly plane of how do creative arts assist you in discovering more about yourself and the world around you? Specifically, how do creative arts connect you with yourself, others, and your community?
Yeah, I think it's amazing, like in my personal times, just with music, right? Like not leading others, not with other people. I give a lot of lessons. I do a lot of that kind of stuff, right? But when it's just me, then I'm just there in that moment. It's just like, it's incredible to realize that, you know, God is that source and that everything comes from him. And then to interact with him in that real relationship and look around and just see the revelation of the beauty of all that there is. One of my favorite places to just sit by myself and play and interact is actually on my back porch swing. And I have just like a little chunk of land and I get to look out and I'm amazed, I'm like, man, that looked really cool when I went out there to have my coffee this morning. But then I come back that afternoon, I'm sitting with a guitar, just having a minute, and I look up again, it's just totally different. Like just, there's this kind of releasing of potential of the world around you that you can literally like see come alive. It's pretty fantastic, like from a personal inspiration perspective. And so in terms of like, how does that help me connect? So for me, myself, having that revelation is almost like an identity affirmation. Like when God says, hey, you're a child of God, I'm having that experience, I'm interacting with him, and I'm seeing that come alive. And it's very, very real and relational in that moment. It's not well, maybe there's a thing, maybe there's not a thing. you're experiencing it really happen to you right there in that moment. And that's really, a powerful connection for me. And as I think about like, how do I connect with others? 2 weeks ago, I did a songwriting session with one of the vocalists that's on my team, and she brought an awesome like set of lyrics she had written, and she was like, I just don't, the instruments, and I don't get it. And I was like, well, we have all the instruments here. Let's see what happens, right? And so we began kind of this songwriting process. And so there was this inspiration from her spiritual revelation lyrically that led us to a place where we could create, almost a whole new song together, or the beginnings of one. It was pretty exciting. And then as I like coach and teach other artists, not dissimilar from what Christian was saying about, hey, you hit a wrong note, but was that really a wrong note? And challenging some of those things. A lot of times when I'm working with other artists, I'll challenge them, and some of my rocker guys that are on the team, they love this. I'll say, be more, do more, just do more. Like, it's okay. Like, let go. Like, stop trying to play that just like the track. Like, be an artist. Like, be free yourself. Be in this moment. Release yourself. And so what happens is, by me challenging them, we build trust and we build a relationship. And we start to build a community of artists that are prepared to kind of let ourselves go and let our best art out in a way that would have been restrained if we had stayed to what the notes on the page were, and what was happening there. And then as I think about like the graphic art side of it, a lot of times I'm creating a visual representation, more often than not, of a pastoral concept. So our pastor is actually spinning up a sermon series, if you will, right? Like, these are a set of things we're going to talk about. Here's some scripture that it's rooted in. And then I come in as the creative, and I find a way to get inspired by kind of we call it verbal art, for lack of a better word, right? Because there's definitely like an art form to that. I think you guys would agree. And so taking that verbal art conceptually and trying to transition it where we can represent it visually to help more people connect to it, right? Because if you hear a thing, that's powerful. But if you see a thing, you hear a thing, you experience a thing, wow, that really like changes kind of the human interaction and how that works for us. So that's been really cool. I recently, and there's lots of fun ways to do this, just to nerd out and share for a second, but recently I really had a hard time with one of the sermon series. Usually I'll read some notes and I'll have 2 or 3 ideas that I get really quickly. Recently there was one that I really struggled with, and what I did to kind of break loose creatively in that moment was I went and I wrote down every scripture and looked at all the notes, and then I did like a big mind map of all the themes and ideas that would happen like around that. And then I started the idea of drafting a couple of artistic concepts, and then I was actually able to work with a couple other people that aren't even artists, but they have a good eye, and they understood what we were working on, and I was able to gather even further inspiration from them and land at a concept that's, very stark, catches eye-grabbing, catches attention, right, and in a powerful way helps people to really connect with what they're hearing, verbally. So it's been really cool. And then in terms of community, every Sunday, just about every Sunday, more Sundays than not, leading worship, right? I'm leading a group of people to sing together, be together, and we're sharing these super like intimate moments with our Lord together, where we're giving Him all the glory. And it's very, very cool to have those moments together. But the thing that's most exciting is I'm really blessed to be a part of a small church where our mission is actually, rather than the big production and some of those things, which we do our best, but more important for us is the focus on connecting to our community and the people outside that body. And so it's really been powerful for me these last few years since we planted the church to see that come alive. And these people that come on a Sunday morning and we sing together, we're loving God together. But at the end of the day, they didn't go out and like hit the street and beat somebody with the Bible, right? Like, they went out there and they loved somebody the way Jesus would have really loved somebody, the way He would have healed somebody and shown up and been there for somebody. And it's been really cool to watch, 4, 5, 6, now almost 700 people that, when they leave those doors, and not everybody's perfect, not everybody does it, but they're entering our small community and trying to interact with people in a positive way and just love them where they're at. Whether they're prepared to talk about Jesus, hear about Jesus, accept Jesus as truth, that's okay. You don't have to be in that place. We're going to love you regardless, because you're worth it. And you're worth it because Jesus said you're worth it, and that's good enough for us. So it's been pretty cool in that way.
One more time.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
How do creative arts assist you in discovering more about yourself and the world around you? Specifically, how do creative arts connect you with yourself, others, and your community?
Right. So I love this question. So for me personally, sitting down at the piano, the hours that I've slaved away at a piano, especially in high school, I was able to find that as an escape to everything that I was dealing with. Within 5 minutes of just playing, it's gone. I forgot about all that stress. And then discovering, so I kind of mentioned most of my training background has been classical. So once I got to Bellarmine, where I kind of experienced this different way of connecting with other people, it's almost like musically, you can see how everything mirrors everything else. And what I mean is musically, me coming from a completely different background and experiencing music different from all these other musicians that either know jazz or like that, like coming here was the first time I was really exposed to jazz. So I use that as an example. Jazz musicians think of theory and harmony and scales in a completely different way that just blew my mind. And what I saw was everyone kind of has their niche a little bit. And my professor, who Mimi Tunnell, she's now retired. She was very classically trained. She tried to get into jazz, and she had a professor tell her, "Yeah, you should stick to classical." So she just did. But for some reason, for me, I had this deep curiosity of like, I want to know a little bit of everything. Like, I don't want to just stick to this one thing, because I saw the value in connecting with people through it. Because Dave Clark, back to him, he's awesome. He helped me understand not only just spiritually, but how music, when you're sitting down, like improvisation was almost a completely foreign concept to me as a classical musician. Classical musicians, you're given the written music and you play it note for note on the page. And then all of a sudden, when I jumped into a jazz ensemble, and Dave has told this funny story of when he first got into it, he had that same classical experience, and then you're given this tune. You have like the melody and that's it, and then there's nothing else. And so when the band director pulled him in to do that, and he was like, sax solo, he just sat there. He was like, and he stopped. The director like stopped. He was like, "Why are you not playing?" And he's like shaking a little bit, you know, there's no notes on the page. and so the band director was like, "Well, of course there's not notes on the page. It's a solo, you improvise." And so like before, no one explained that to him. And so like at least 2 more times, he was like, "All right, go." They're playing the main melody, and they go sax solo, and he just sits there again. He's like shaking even more. He doesn't know what to do. And he's like, he stops. By the 3rd time, the director walks up to him, and he's like, "Why aren't you playing?" And he says again, "There's no notes on the page." He's like, "I don't know what to do." And the band director said to him, "You don't play what's on the page. You play what's in here and here. Play." And so like he did it. It was awful, but he just did it. And so I remember coming in and he's explaining that story. He made it very clear to us, especially when we talk about improv, you're having a conversation. Listen to the other person and what they're doing and respond. And so it was like throwing everything that I knew out the window, like theory, reading the notes on the page, and just playing from here. And so like that was my first experience where, oh my God, I'm experiencing music completely different. And I loved it. And so for me, also in high school, I got heavily into Spanish. And what also made me fall in love with it was bachata, cumbia, salsa, all those styles. So I was able to connect to that culture through the music because I wanted to listen to that music more. I wanted to understand also what they were saying. So I studied it heavily and assimilated so hard that some of my friends that literally are Mexican, don't speak any English, refer to me when they introduce me. This is my primo, he's Hispanic. Because they tell me that like you've worked so hard on your accent that you don't sound like you're from here. And I was only able to do that. I give that credit to the music because I listened to it so much and practiced singing along to just totally eradicate the accent. So I in my life experience found that it's very profound what music can do for us culturally because it allows us to connect. Because I was only able to connect to that culture and the language through the music. And to go on that now, like further, for me, where I'm seeing that I'm also able to connect deeper with myself, understand myself better, as well as connecting with other cultures. For 20 so years of my life, I grew up adopted, so I was adopted at birth. I never knew my ancestry. And in many indigenous cultures throughout the world have this importance of honoring your ancestors, doing these dances, traditional chants, and all kinds of stuff. That puts you in this like meditative trance-like state. And for whatever reason, throughout my whole life, I had been exposed to Celtic music, Irish music, and I felt a deep connection to it, but I didn't understand why. And so when I graduated, my parents got us all 23andMe, and my last name is actually Casey, which the Irish pride themselves a lot in their names and families and such. And so my dad, that side of the family always prided in the Irish heritage. And so when we all did 23andMe, it was really funny. That side, like my dad, my brother, all them, they're like 40, 45%. I ended up being 60% Irish. So I blew them all out of the water. And so like that made so much sense. And so when I realized that, you know, I worked so hard to assimilate to Latino culture and the language and the music, learning how to dance it too. Dance is another way to connect with humans that it's really sad in the US, we've lost that dancing part of our culture, swing dancing and stuff. That I wish it was bigger because again, in my experience, through art in that way, expressing yourself, you're able to connect deeper with other people. So when I then realized, you know, if I did that for like Latino culture, and I have all this Irish heritage, why not just, you know, learn the language, do the music? So actually, I brought my tin whistles. So I thought I would play for you all just a few tunes and kind of like make it fun so that, does anyone know anything about Irish music? Anything, kind of, what do you know?
I know a lot of like drinking songs. I know how like Irish culture and like Scotch Irish culture has like influenced bluegrass music, because that's what I play.
Yeah, so that's another thing, is that folk music, country music, bluegrass music, old-timey music, they came over here and brought all their instruments and their music, and actually a lot of tunes that are traditional Irish tunes are the same exact tune, same melody, just played old-timey or bluegrass style. So especially growing up in Lexington, in that bluegrass region, it made sense that for 50, 60, whatever generations, my family has been there because the bluegrass region is all rolling hills, horse farms. The Irish came there because it reminded them of home. So there's something that I love about that land that I would love to return to Ireland someday to see it. But anyways, so some things about Irish music really quickly, there's different kinds of tunes. There's airs, reels, jigs. They get faster and faster as they play because they have this spirit of dancing that has been for 500 to 1,000 years. The English always fought them, tried to take them over. As far back as Romans, Vikings, the English Empire, no matter what was thrown at them, they're now the Republic of Ireland. And so like they never gave up and they always withstood. They always had this spirit of never giving up. And there's something powerful about that, because I found that as I'm understanding myself, I'm the same exact way. I never give up no matter what. And I never stop. When I have my mindset on I want to do this, I will do it. And so, being a pianist, I decided to pick up a different instrument. I'll play a few tunes for you guys. So I kind of want to show you the difference of playing something that is rehearsed, a melody, and then I'm going to completely improvise to see if you all connect with any particular tune or just the improvisation more, because improvising is where I'm going to be very vulnerable and my inner self is going to come out. It's kind of like what Dave Clark has explained before, where your inner voice comes through, you're speaking through this instrument. So, just real quick, I'm going to take that. So here's a tune that I love that is played in old-timey as well as an Irish style, called Elk River Blues. A West Virginian with Celtic heritage wrote this tune when they were building all these dams and they're going to flood his house. So he wrote Elk River Blues because he was going to lose his home. So this is so think like you're just about to lose your house, your home, your land that you loved, and you grew up there for generations. It's a little sad too. But then on top of that, they also have the spirit that is very lighthearted too. So as sad and beautiful as their music can be, they also, if they play something sad, then they start getting faster, faster, and lighten the mood. So here's a jig, and then after that, I'll improvise something just completely from the heart. There, the last note. Yeah. So this is obviously not my first instrument. I've been playing this for months-ish, so I'm still learning. But I love it because you start with, and I have the other ones. Generally, people start with have you ever heard of the penny whistle, anybody? You start with this, and then you generally get the lower instrument. Some people translate to the wooden traditional flute, and then because it's the same hold, so it is very easy to pick up. It's easier than a recorder. Did anyone in school, elementary, learn recorder? So the reason why it's easier is because recorder has a thumb hole, and then you also have two other holes with tiny holes in the center. So the tin whistle only has 6 holes, that's it. That's all you have to worry about. So that's why it's super easy to pick up. I encourage anyone that's not musically inclined to, they're like $10. Pick one up, and then once you get used to this, once you get used to that, then that's when people translate to this, because the holes are much bigger. And then once you get used to that, then you just translate same hole, like that. And then they also do the same holes for, has anyone heard of the uilleann pipes? So everyone knows what the bagpipes are, right? That's the Scottish instrument. The uilleann pipes are the Irish ones that they play it here. The chanter is on their leg, and then they lay all the pipes across their lap, and they squeeze here, like that, like a duck. So hopefully I'll get that. So I'll end with an improvised little melody, and then the next question. Sorry to take so much time.
Oh, no.
I figured people might want to be interested. So this one is totally from the heart. So that coming from, thank you. Thank you. So there is a difference, or actually, let me ask, did anyone notice a difference in my playing compared to a rehearsed tune and something completely improvised? Was there a noticeable difference?
I would say the passion and like just the energy that you brought to the improvised one.
Yeah, because just like how I was saying, like that's my voice. Like all those other tunes, someone else wrote. But there's this freedom, and I even after that just feel calm.
It's like there's no mistakes in it at all, like no room for error. You know, like you just breathe through it in a way.
Yeah, and that's part of that freedom that I was talking about in expressing yourself. Because I mean, And going back to Dave Clark, like when he talks about that improv, when you're having a conversation, I mean, this whole thing that we're doing is improv. When we're conversing and expressing ourselves genuinely, we didn't rehearse that. Like everything that is coming out of me right now is coming from my deepest essence of who I am. I'm being very genuine and vulnerable. And I think that's the best way we can connect. And I think that going back to, that we're all children of God, that we all come from the same source. I think that's how we honor that. When they say namaste, they're literally saying like, I honor the light that is within you that is also within me. It's recognizing that we are one. So I'll end with that. So.
Yeah, the last thing that I have before we open up for questions is just, do you all have anything that you would like to share, any final thoughts, or any questions for each other before I let everyone
No, I mean, I'm pretty easy, thanks for having me out. We don't get to say it at the end, it's fun to get out and talk with folks. I guess one thing would be, I think historically, we've made art like very personal and creative spirit very personal. And I agree, and I think that it is. But I would just reiterate that there's power in how we create together and when we share with each other. And so I just share that with you guys to encourage you. If any of you are artists or creative spirits, don't be afraid to share that with the person sitting next to you. Usually there's this broken little artist inside of us that stops us from doing that or judges ourselves too harshly. And what you might find is that the person next to you says, wow, that really spoke to me. That really did something for me. And that's very inspiring. So just, don't be afraid to be creative and share it with the people around you. It's really powerful.
I have seen that, at least in my life, my closest relationships are with the people that create. My friends are like my family.
Yeah. Well, that is really good stuff. Okay, now it's your guys' turn to ask them questions. I'm sick of it. I'm done with it.
Andy, do you want to? Sorry, I just want to. If you do have to scoot, can you please just make sure to scan this QR code, fill out the survey about today's event? Thank you.
I wanted to ask.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about your guys' traditions growing up. I know both of you covered it a little bit, but specifically like for Royce, like what, I don't know when you first found your faith or if it's been like you were born into a family that already practiced Christianity, but like how what you've like kind of grown up with and learned has impacted the way you practice things now. And then same with you, but a little bit different because I know you've gone through a journey of a lot of different experiences and like what all those things coming together really look like for you now.
Okay, so I'm gonna be super truthful with you guys, and it's kind of a mess. So here you go. Great question. So I distinctly remember being a young kid and riding around in the car with my mom, and we listened to KDF, which I grew up in Nashville, and that was the rock radio station in Nashville. So I grew up listening to hardcore, like alternative and rock music. My mom loved it, Stone Temple Pilots, Nirvana, like that's my distinct memories, like as a child. And my mom ultimately and my dad got divorced and remarried a couple times. And when I was 12, I started in band playing saxophone, and my stepdad taught me to play guitar. And we got involved with a bigger church there in the Murfreesboro area. And so as a youth, I started playing in the bands, kind of figuring some of that out while playing saxophone in school and all the way through school. And that's kind of where I was initially like introduced to Jesus. Meanwhile, with my dad, we were going to a Presbyterian church. So, choir, no instruments, right? Super, super traditional. I was christened when I was 12, and the Apostles' Creed, like the whole deal, right? Very, so very like kind of these two like totally opposite ideas, I guess. Like one side of my life was like this super traditional, like Christian, hardcore Lutheran Calvinism kind of point of view, and then the other side was nothing to like, hey, we're gonna do like modern church now. How does that feel? And so, kind of experience all of that like growing up, and ultimately, I got so heavily involved with some of the worship ministry stuff that we would go and help plant churches and build up worship teams when I was younger. And by the end of it, what's funny is we were doing contemporary like modern music, but my stepdad was very like militant about how we did it. Like it needed to be like just so, and he would stop to practice and chastise you in front of everyone, like if you were out of line. Very like you guys have probably seen the like I don't want to call it horror stories, but like the thoughts of like Michael Jackson's dad in the Jackson 5, right? Where he's like, no, like it was definitely like that kind of like environment in our rehearsals and how some of those things went. And so ultimately, like there was a season of my life where I just stopped. I just wasn't going to do any of it. Like I just worked, had a nice guitar, sat in the closet for 8 years, didn't go to church, none of that. And it wasn't until I guess it's been about 6.5, maybe 7 years ago now, that my wife finally said, hey, like, I'm going to go to church and you can come or not. Like, I don't care. And I was like, you know what? I mean, I'm not going to let you go without me. I mean, let's go. And so, I kind of got back in church and more the kind of, not Baptist, but kind of along those lines in that denomination of a church. And so I got immersion baptized to start serving on the teams there. And I didn't realize that I needed that until that time. So it was kind of this kind of evolving journey all the way up until even just these last couple of years. From a background perspective, I mean, was a corporate guy for years and years. So I was at Papa John's corporate, and that's why we moved here. Is I went to work in the corporate office as a junior executive. I did that for a couple of years up until this last April, and I ultimately left that life to go full time in the ministry. So that's kind of all the stuff that I've been through. So
Yeah, that's great.
I guess my background is technically I grew up in a household that, talked to us about Jesus and God, not in a whole lot of depth. I feel like I didn't really have a full understanding of Catholicism, like I said, until I came to Belmont. So we didn't really go to church. I grew up believing in God, and then like by the time I got to high school, I got into Buddhism. As far as music, I grew up, I mean, like what Roy said, I have distinct memories being in my dad's truck, going to preschool, listening to like punk rock. And then my mom would listen to a lot of alternative rock and reggae and all kinds of, yeah. So it was an interesting mix. And then elementary was probably when I started playing piano. So then I was pretty exposed to some classical music. So yeah, that was my background. And then of course coming here, I got exposed to jazz and all kinds of other stuff. I mean, maybe in middle school I had a couple of years experience of percussion, but I got to fully experience like being in a college percussion ensemble, singing in choir, something I didn't get to do as a pianist. Because like when I went to Scapa, it was very like cubbyhole. You're a pianist, that's all you do. And I didn't really like that. So what I did like about coming here to Belmont was I was able to explore a lot of other things because it's a small college, whereas at a big college, they do the same thing. They cubbyhole you. So like I got to do jazz piano lessons, organ lessons, like just dabbling, just because that's the kind of person that I am. I just like dabbling in a little bit of everything and understanding different perspectives.
Thank you so much. That's good.
Yeah, of course.
We have time for probably another one or two. Anybody have
Anything, random question.
Are both of you building in alumni?
I'm not. I am in TSU alumni from Murfreesboro, so actually for accounting of all things.
I clearly am, I've already said. I graduated in 2020, right when COVID hit. They sent us home like that month earlier, so.
We were the unlucky ones.
Yeah, we didn't get our senior recital.
I just wanted to say, I think it's, did you say you picked these up just in the last few months?
I officially started picking up tin whistle in September, so
Okay.
November, 3.
Yeah.
It is probably 2 months, because like I said, I transitioned.
Uh-huh.
Because like you learn, you get used to covering with the pads of your fingers,
Right.
and then for this, you do what's called the piper's grip. So like the uilleann pipe players,
Uh-huh.
low tin whistles started becoming more popular, and they adapted that grip because you can't really cover with just the tips. It's awkward.
Mhm.
So you do ring finger, and then you wrap your fingers around like that. So same thing, ring finger pad, and then you wrap your fingers around, and the uilleann pipe players hold it the exact same way, and the flute. So like once you get used to that, it makes it really easy to transition. So I'm hoping to eventually get my own set of uilleann pipes and.
I just want to say, like, to picking up an instrument that quickly, I mean, you're just very talented.
But
I feel like,
see,
oh my
the
God.
thing is, what I was saying is that it's only 6 holes. So it's
Yeah.
very easy to pick up, even if you're not musically inclined.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was very impressive.
Abby?
Both of you mentioned being like a multi-instrumentalist. Do you think that there is an instrument you're able to connect to better or like more spiritually? Or like a specific instrument class? And like, is that your first instrument or is it a different instrument? Like, why do you think?
Yeah, this is, so that's funny. So I started out as a sax player, and I was ranked, like I was pretty good, but I haven't really played it like as an adult, which is funny. So like, I used to love like playing that instrument, but I just don't like, every once in a while I'll pick it up and play a blues scale and have a little fun, but I don't feel the need to like do that all the time. Now, like, I think I'm constantly like trying to learn. And so I think the thing I'm most excited about right now is playing like electric guitar. I'm having a lot of fun like learning lead lines and a lot of those different kinds of things. It's challenging me and challenging my hands to work differently because I've been an acoustic guitar player as long as I can remember now. And but you asked like specifically about spiritual connection. It's still funny to me. When I started out playing worship music, I was the bass player. And man, every time I pick up a bass guitar, it just comes out of me. It's just like, that was the thing that these hands were made to do. And so even though I don't play it like a ton anymore, it's fun. And then the other thing I would share is that I can be kind of a moody musician. So like sometimes I'll be like in a mood where I just need to play bass, and I'll do that. But more often than not, what happens is I get in a mood where I need to play drums, and I don't know if it's because I just need to smash things or like what the deal is, but like, but yeah, I'll sit down at a drum kit and put on some heavy metal and just blast away. And like sometimes that's a thing that I need to do. So Rachel will laugh because she's on the worship team there, but sometimes that's what's happening in that worship center is I have headphones in with heavy metal, and all you hear is our drums smashing as loud as they can go, shaking the whole building. So yeah, so.
So I really like that question because what I found from starting out with piano, it's technically a percussion instrument because there's hammers hitting the string. And so because of that, with every instrument, you have pros and cons. There's limitations with certain things that you can and can't do. I always said, getting older, one of my friends that's a violinist, I mean, she or even my friends that are guitar players, like we would always talk about like, well, at least I can do this. Well, you can't do that. I can play chord. I can play like, but with piano, you have attack and decay. So once you hit that note and it is sounding, it's not really going to change. The tone doesn't change, and there's that decay, like it just eventually dies down. Whereas with that, what I found is what I can do that I can't do on piano is it's more expressive. And there's something more spiritual about it, I guess, that I have this deeper connection because the melody lines are more expressive than you can get on the piano. Whereas on piano, you can accompany yourself, harmonize yourself. And I still, like an acoustic piano, I feel is more spiritual to me than an electric. An electric feels like there's not much connection, whereas with real wood and materials of the instrument, there's just something about it. But going back to the tin whistle and like wind instruments and flute, there's something about that instrument that actually, fun fact, the flute is the oldest instrument that we know of that we have. There's like thousands and thousands of years back, like remnants of a flute carved out of bone. So it's one of the oldest, well, the oldest instrument that we know of that we've had, next to drums, of course. And so, and then too, like in Hinduism, there's depictions of like Krishna has a flute, is depicted as this, no matter what he was doing, he was very multidimensional in that he would be a kingmaker, he was a warrior, he dabbled in politics, he was a musician, he did a little bit of everything. And it doesn't necessarily matter that this person existed or not, we honor the qualities of that person. And one of the things about him was that no matter what he was doing, he had a smile on his face. So for me, I try to, like, no matter what I'm doing, I try to have fun with it. And there's definitely something about that that gives me even more freedom that I didn't have on the piano, if that makes sense. So I find that I'm able to be even more expressive.
I don't have a question, but I do have just a comment or something to share, because I think both of you sort of hit at this, and there's you made me think of a YouTube video of a guy, and he was actually at a show, and I think it was a comedy show kind of thing. Anyway, he asked this guy in the audience, like, if he could sing a song. So he sang a few bars of Amazing Grace. And then he says, okay, now think about your mom died, your dog died, your mom's in prison. Like, he gave him this kind of backstory or whatever. He's like, now how would you sing it? And the guy sings it again, and it's like, it's just like, you can feel the emotion, and there's so much more. And he talks about like knowing your purpose and your why, and that kind of, and I just am thinking about, like, as you all are talking about, when you're making music together with your worship team, and that animating purpose behind it is to praise God and is to serve God and to convey and connect with your assembly there. And then, like, when you're making music and you talk about like connecting to your heritage and telling stories about what's happening within the culture and things like that, it's that animated purpose that I think it changes how it sounds, and it changes what it means.
It changes how you experience it.
Yes. For you, I would imagine, and for the listeners or whoever's coming into contact with the music that you make also.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah, I may not know much, but with like our experiences, like our life experiences, I find that they're very much incommunicable. You can't really give someone an experience through your words. You can describe it as best as you can, but I feel like music gives you that experience of that emotion and stuff. So like, if I were to go to one of your services, I mean, I may not, he might try to describe it to me, but I wouldn't understand until I had the experience, and then through their music, I would feel the power of how they experience it too. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, has anybody been to a black church?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's awesome. Super powerful. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like, and I hear it from people firsthand, like in our congregation, like we'll do a song that's on the radio even, right? But they experienced it like in that moment where we brought that purpose and we shared that with them. And then they'll go listen to it on the radio later and they'll be like, it just wasn't, I just didn't. And I was like, yeah, it's just different. Like when you're here and you're a part of the experience and you mean it, you know, sometimes you'll have those moments where you're just in your car with that song. You need that moment and you needed that song in that moment. But a lot of times if you're trying to recreate the same thing you just had 10 minutes ago, but you did that with 400 people all singing together and it was this whole different, it's just a very different thing.
Yeah, there's a more human
Absolutely.
connection where you're seeing the person playing it and expressing it, whereas, you know, on the radio, you're not seeing it.
Yeah.
And that's that visual part too.
Yeah.
So.
This is wonderful though. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thanks for
definitely.
having us.
And I'm sure for other folks,
Yeah.
we are at time, so folks need to get to class, but yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all so
Thank
much
you
for
for
coming
having
in, for your